everyone, I'm Ari here with Rachel, and we're your hosts for the Merry Writer podcast. This week we're on episode 223, asking our guest, how do you deal with anxiety as an author? Before we dive into the topic, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening if you haven't already. And if you enjoy the show, please share it with friends and feel free to write a review.
Now, please help us welcome Sam Weiss to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Hello, it's great to be here.
I am really looking forward to this conversation, but before we start, would you like to tell everyone why you chose to discuss writers struggling with anxiety?
Yes. So yeah, I have been dealing with various types of anxiety, and I feel like kind of just in the state of the world right now, everyone is dealing with anxiety. And writing and publishing a book is it could just be so hugely anxiety inducing, especially, when you're putting, years of work and your heart and soul into something, and anyone can judge it online, and there's just so many steps in self-publishing and writing. So I feel like it's important to talk about mental health struggles, and there's been a trend recently where a lot of people are talking more openly about it and using their platforms to spread awareness. And once you start a conversation, there's so many people that are like, yes, I have the same thing, I feel the same way. And because it can feel very isolating, but then once you actually start a conversation about it, so many people feel the exact same way. So I feel like it's important to talk about because of that.
Absolutely. I think that really is the first step, is you just need one person to start that conversation, and then you eventually get all these little followers. And before you know it, you have a whole crew and we're all nervous wrecks.
Yeah.
But, we make it work together somehow. And I think our listeners, if people have been listening to the show long enough, they probably know that I have generalized anxiety disorder, and I also have social anxiety. So I totally get it. And writing is a very lonely profession, especially even if you have a lot of writer friends online, it's still online. It's very difficult to get that face-to-face time. Even if you do it through Zoom, it's not the same. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. So yeah, discussing mental health as a whole and just anxiety, in and out of the writing space, is super important.
Yeah, I agree with that because I have social anxiety and I've had it most of my life. And it's so crippling at times. Even when you kind of intellectually know that other people suffer from it, it's not the same as when someone turns around and says, I go through that. And especially if they talk about specific situations like, oh, I feel really overwhelmed in this situation and that situation. And as you said, letting go of your work and putting it out into the world is so terrifying. And I think there's probably a lot of writers, especially new writers, who don't put their stuff out, not even small snippets online, because they're struggling with anxiety. And I think having the ability to listen to someone say, I suffer from this. This is how I got through it. This is how I've managed it. It's not like you cure it, but this is how I've managed it, to be able to put a book out, to put some ideas out, to connect to the writing community. I think that is important. And I think it is something we should talk about. So yeah. Okay, with that, let's dive into this topic with our first question, which is, what are some possible triggers for writers that might create anxiety?
Okay, so for this one, I was just thinking about in general, what happens to me. For me, I will focus on a perfect first draft, which is, that unicorn that's never ever going to be achieved. And every single writer seems to go through this, right? Where you start it and you're like, oh, I've got this all sorted out. And yeah, once you start focusing on that perfection, and you start getting worried about this one part of the story and oh no, this isn't working. And it can start to just kind of, create a cascade effect where you just are don't feel good. That's the only way I can put it, right? Where you're just oh no, what have I done? So I feel like that creates a huge amount of anxiety for me when I'm writing.
Yeah, the perfect first draft is just something that I think over time, the more manuscripts you create, the more you kind of get over that hump. But I get it. When you write your first draft, you want it to be perfect at first. And then you'll have these moments where you think it is perfect. And then you'll reread a scene or reread a chapter and you're like, oh no, this is horrible. This is really bad. And then you just set it aside because you're like, well, now I can't be a writer. I suck. So yeah, I think everybody suffers from that perfect first draft. I like how you described it as a unicorn that will never come to be, because it's true.
I have to make a point. It's weird is the perfect first draft, because it's one of those things where, you know, the first draft is meant to be messy, it's meant to be rough, and you know you're not supposed to compare yourself to somebody else's printed book, because of course there's a huge difference. I recently, when we're recording this, I recently found out something else. I beta read for someone and I got to see their early draft. Obviously it wasn't their first one, and I already know what their finished product looks like, so that's pretty impressive, seeing the difference of how it can be from one to another. But their draft was still such a shock to me, because in my head I had an idea of what the first draft should look like. Yes, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I had this idea that, oh well, it has to be this specific level, and I've been chasing this crazy level. And then I read this person's draft and it was like, wow, it can really be a lot rougher. And I hadn't twigged that I was still chasing the perfect first draft. I'm still spending too much time thinking, this is too rough, it needs to be a little bit better than that. And actually it doesn't.
No, I get that. Like, there's a specific bar that you have set for yourself. If other people are going to read this manuscript, the manuscript needs to be at this level. And then when they're done with it, the manuscript now needs to be this level for the editor to see it, and so on and so forth. So no, that makes total sense. You get caught in this loop and you're setting yourself like these invisible bars that you have to reach, when in reality, no, you don't. The first draft is supposed to be in the dirt, and other people are supposed to help it grow because they are the sunshine and the water and all that photosynthesis stuff.
Yep. Well, yeah, I agree with that too. And even with the first draft, like what Ari was saying about seeing other people's rough drafts, even when you go from a finished product of yours back to that drafting, you know, you go from the very end of editing all the way back down to the bottom of the barrel is what it feels like. Feel that too, even with my own writing. It's just like, how, you know, I had like such a nice polished piece here. Like, what is this garbage that I'm making right now?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Like talking about like imposter syndrome. So this is actually something that I don't really get so much writing, but I do editing full time. And I have that so bad for that, because I remember when I would read about writers having imposter syndrome in your head, like, and this is someone, you know, I have anxiety, but I would kind of just be like, it's fine. You know, you publish a book, it's fine. You know, just ignore the imposter syndrome. It's fine. It'll go away. And then when I started experiencing it as an editor, it's like, oh my God, okay, I finally get what these people mean. It is so crippling. It is like, it's awful. Like, imposter syndrome can mess you up so much. It can just cause so much anxiety, can make you feel like so low and bad, to the point where like you don't really want to work on it because you don't have any confidence anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I get that the imposter syndrome from an editor standpoint is like super crippling, as you said, because I used to be part of a local writers group and we would critique each other's manuscripts. And in my mind, every other person in that room was a way better writer than me. So when I critiqued their manuscripts, I was like, what notes could I possibly give them that would be any help? Because like, I can't give them constructive criticism because they're already at a much higher level than I am. So it's like you go in this vicious cycle. It's like you have imposter syndrome with writing, then you have it with editing, and it's just like a lose-lose situation until you like inevitably get over that hump and you just deal with it, which is easier said than done.
Well, that's it. Exactly. It's like, how do you deal with it? It literally is just talking yourself around and being like, just shut up and do it. Shut up and publish. Shut up and write. Just do it. And then you think, well, some of the biggest names in writing suffer from imposter syndrome. And when I found that out, it did make me feel a bit better, because it's like, well, if they suffer from it and I suffer from it, look at that. Me and some of the best sellers in the world have something in common. Excellent. But no, that is one of those things. And I guarantee that stops a lot of people pushing ahead with their writing career, does imposter syndrome. And seriously, what is there to say to get past it?
Right, because I don't think it ever really gets better. It's like once you get over imposter syndrome once, it's not like it gets any easier with the next book. Did you want to read that last point, or should I go on to the next question?
I was gonna say, if you guys had like something, because you both said you suffer from anxiety and social anxiety, which I also suffer from. So that's also great knowing that we're all dying right now.
Hooray!
Like, it's just so nice. Because I was just thinking when I was writing down these points, what do other writers, because my anxiety is always looks different from someone else's. So like, is there something that you guys have that creates anxiety that you can think of?
Life
Oh,
is just one big anxiety-inducing mess. It's all I can think.
in terms of writing, Ari.
Yeah, and it affects it.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
You know, you have a stress day and it just because let's be honest, everything that happens just leaks into your writing. To me, a little bit of anxiety is if you share something online, which, let's be honest, you're supposed to share your work. All that happens is someone says something, and even if they say something nice, like, oh, there's a lot of passive voice in that. And then it's like, oh my God, I should never have shared it. It's still not ready. And then you panic. You don't put it on the website anymore. And yeah, that's what I have. It's like the smallest thing. If I'm in the wrong mindset and someone says something slightly critical, I can just crumble and be like, right, well, that's it. I'm not doing that anymore. And it's gone.
No, that's fair. That is absolutely fair. I was actually gonna say one of the main triggers for me is marketing because it kind of piggybacks off of the imposter syndrome. But like my main issue is being confident in myself. I really don't have much of an issue sharing my work online. I do it all the time and I've been doing it for years. But in terms of spreading the word that, hey, I posted a new short story on my website, that's out the window. I don't bother with that. I used to when I was like super active on social media, and then I just quietly let it drift by. And if people find it, great. And if they don't, oh well. But with all of that said, because we know that writing that first draft and going through the editing process and marketing yourself, that is all part of the writing career, no matter what your goals are. But anxiety is a part of us. So how can anxiety put your writing career on hold?
Well, I think a big thing, like you were just mentioning, even with marketing, where you just are like, yep, it's out here. I don't want to, we're done. That is like a huge thing for me too. I hate putting myself online. I hate being vulnerable online. I don't like putting photos of myself online. And all those things are so good for marketing, right? Like when I do something like that, when I post something, it'll be like 3 times the amount of likes I get if I just do just a little random post. So that is a huge thing, like just that. So, but I think also, like when you finish a book, you have all this pressure to write that next book. That's like the biggest thing in self-publishing. It's like, get the next book out the door. Your best thing for marketing and advertising is writing the next book. And that can be really a lot of anxiety. And that can make you not want to write the second book. And then especially in today's like hustle culture that we have, I feel like you're not allowed to take a break. You need to post on Instagram this many times a week, post on TikTok 3 times a day. And, it's so hard to like turn it off. And sometimes you'll just shut down. You'll just stop doing it. And then you're anxious that, oh, I'm not doing anything now. It's just this horrible like feedback loop.
And then you feel guilty and upset with yourself that you're not being productive and you're not doing anything. But really, it's like I am being told to do X, Y, and Z, and I just can't. The burnout happens. So yeah. Oh, that's real. I can't keep up with the amount of indie authors self-publishing a book every couple of months. As a reader and as a writer, I just can't keep up financially, time-wise. And I don't want to do that. I want to be able to enjoy the journey. As anxiety-inducing that journey is, I want to be able to take it slow and take my time and enjoy it rather than worrying about the next book when I'm not even finished with the current one.
Yeah, I am going to completely agree with that because I know we moved from like put out a book a year to like put out 4 books a year and several novellas and a couple of short stories and start a course. And honestly, whoever decided that was the main thing is a dick. I'm so tired of it. As Rachel said, even as a reader, I love reading series, yeah, well, and I write series. Doesn't sound right when I say it. And I'm starting to look for standalone. I'm not finding another book coming out like within a month because it's so stressful to be, oh, look, there's the book and the next one's out and the next one's out and the next one's out. And if you're following an author and they have a newsletter and they're bringing out all the whole series, the whole trilogy, whatever, in like 3 months, it's so hard to not end up catching spoilers that are mentioned in the newsletter or on the website because, the next one's out. You're thinking, I'm still on the first one. And also, I'm on the first one of somebody else's book and the first one of somebody else's book. And they're all bringing their books out so close together. I'm actually feeling anxious just talking about that. So, yeah, the concept of hustle culture, of this push, 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 push. I mean, I thought we were going to get past that and go back to like, just calm down, just make it a bit easier. But no, I mean, surely that can definitely cause burnout, especially if you're new and you're just putting out your debut novel. And as you said, you've got this whole pressure behind you. When's the next book coming out? When's the next book coming out? Have you written it? Have you sorted it? When's the third book coming out? Oh my God, that sounds awful. That really sounds awful to me.
It is awful. It really is awful, especially since like even before you finish the current book you're on, how many times do people ask you, when are you going to get that published? You're still working on that? Which I think we did a podcast episode on that a while ago about like questions writers hate or something like that. And that was one of them.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely feel that. And then, yeah, again, like even when you're talking about, I feel like now there's this pressure to have to like read all these books. And then on top of it, another thing that came to mind, as a writer, you're always being told you have to read everything in your genre. You have to keep up to date. You have to read every new release in your genre. And the thing is, sometimes I don't want to do that. At the end of the day, I just want to like lay down in bed and read like whatever I want. And so I think kind of like in the past like couple of years, I have been trying to ignore stuff like that. Like even when it comes to writing your book, where it's like, okay, you know what? The next book's going to come out when it comes out. I cannot write 4 books a year. That's just not going to happen for me. I'm going to stop making unrealistic goals for myself. And I'm just going to like simmer down. And that has really helped my anxiety to just be like, no, that's beyond me. I'm doing what I can do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, that's the key. Unrealistic goals, recognize those. An excellent thing. You got to recognize which goals are unrealistic and too much for you and dial it back. Yeah, it'll make a huge difference.
You can't get away from it though, as you say. It's in your face all the time. And there is, even if people aren't pushing, like even if people aren't reaching out to you specifically saying, when's your next book? There is this kind of, it's like a hover behind you. Well, everyone else is doing it. You should be bringing out that many books. And what you said about how like the push to read everything in the genre, especially the big stuff that's coming out. It was, oh, have you read like The Fourth Wing? Is it called The Fourth Wing? I have not read that. Honestly, I have not read that. I wanted to read that, and then the hype and all the stress about it and everyone screaming about reading it, honestly, turned me off. Like it does when I watch movies and someone goes, oh my God, it's the best movie in the world. And it's like, you know what? I'm probably not going to watch it now because you've ruined it. And what you said about like the pressure can be quite stressful to that. I found that I stopped enjoying reading. I didn't enjoy reading as much because there was all these books coming out and all this pressure to read the next one and the next one and the next one. And now we have got self-publishing, and so many people are publishing a day. And if you're friends in the writing community, you obviously, no matter what, you can't help but feel obligated to people you've known a long time in the writing community that, they brought a book out, you should read it. And I have friends' book in my Kindle, and I haven't got round to them because I'm still reading other books in my Kindle or other ones I bought, to the point where then you start feeling bad. It's like, oh, I haven't read their book yet. They brought it out ages ago. I feel really guilty. And it's like, it's taking the fun away from it. And it's not good. That's not what you want at all.
Yeah, it's just like lack of book sales or recognition when you finally put something out. It can like, yeah, put you into like this positive feedback loop of anxiety where you check your page, your KDP page, 3 days in a row. It's just the 0 number. You check your Goodreads, no new ads, right? And it just feels like you're just, screaming into the void. Another thing, that kind of comes with that is when you've like done a book release or like you've done a big promo with a bunch of other authors and you come down after that high and then you're kind of back at the baseline of, okay, now how do I sell books? I'm at 0 again. That can mess with you a lot, even if it's only like a few days or like a week. I feel like in today's society, we're in such a, like instant gratification that when you look at a trend over time, when you're self-publishing, it's like months until you kind of start seeing a positive thing. And when you're living just day to day in that anxiety and that hustle culture and like, oh my God, no one's hearing my book, no one's seeing me, it can really affect you and make you just not want to do anything.
Do you find that you have kind of got into the headspace of constantly checking stats every day to the point where you feel like it's become another chore on the list that you can't stop yourself just checking all the time?
Oh yeah, that's like a huge thing for me, is just obsessively checking for notifications everywhere. Like that's been me even before I like publish. So sometimes I literally like, it's like I need to leave my phone upstairs and go do something around the house, go take my dog for a walk, and just unplug, because once you get in that cycle, it's so hard to break. And it's like, I got to stop doing this so I can start living my life.
Yeah, I get that. You got to be more in the moment. And because I used to do the same thing, like when I self-published my book, I was checking my sales all the time, multiple times a day. And you get an email when somebody buys the book too. My email goes straight to my phone. So if I got a sale, I would have known about it immediately, but I still checked it anyway. And then was surprised when it was still at 0.
You can't help yourself though. I think that, I mean, all these systems are designed to make you want to check. It's like if you're on social media and you post something and then you just, I'll refresh. I'll just refresh. And it's like, why are you refreshing? If somebody likes it, they'll like it and you'll see it later. But you just, well, I'm on here now. I'll just refresh. And you kind of get sort of trapped in your own head. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Just something about the whole like anxiety and the writing career. I've been looking at trying to do traditional publishing. So what I've been doing is I've been making notes of like agents and everything. And it's interesting, even when just going on their like submission pages, so many of them are like, you need to have a following. You need to be very, very active online. And when you think of how intense it is just writing a book, just getting over the imposter syndrome and the hurdle of it. And then it's also, you have to put so much effort into the marketing, and not even marketing, but marketing you, not the book, but you, the person. You've got to share pieces of yourself out there, and you've got to connect with readers. They need to know everything about you so they can connect enough to want to buy your book, and don't keep talking about your book because, that might drive them away. So you've got to get this wonderful balance of don't talk about your book, but also talk about your book, because otherwise, how are they going to know about your book? But also talk about yourself and share yourself, like you said. And if you're not comfortable putting videos or photos up, because I do not like putting photos up at all, that's why most of my imagery is an avatar. It's another form of this pressure of just like, you need to step outside of your comfort zone all the time. And if you're an anxious person, there's only so much stepping outside of a comfort zone you can do a day. Am I right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's kind of like this huge vicious cycle of what do I want to do and what should I be doing? And like, what's the right way to go about this? What's the quote unquote wrong way to go about this? I mean, there's really no right or wrong answer. It's all based on what your definition of success is and what your goals are. But it's so easy to get wrapped up in what everybody else is doing. And if you want to make a name for yourself, if you want your books to be seen, you need to keep up with what everybody else is doing, even if you don't have the same goals as them. And it becomes like debilitating almost. And listen, we're halfway through this conversation. I'm enjoying it. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, like, why did we start writing in the first place? This is hard.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but every now and then I swing back between like, oh yeah, this is definitely the one thing I want to do with my life. And oh my God, I don't think I ever want to be published. I think I'll just stay in the background and not bother. But we'll skip past that part and go to what are some techniques that can help reduce anxiety when marketing? Because I think we all need this. Even if you're not a very anxious person, I think we all need to know some tips.
Well, like, yeah, my biggest tip is just do it. And like we were talking, just a couple points ago, you have to be out of your comfort zone, but there's only so much of like your comfort zone you can always be out. So I do it in small steps. For me, my biggest thing is if there's so much to do, I will write a list of things and I'll be like, okay, I need to achieve this in like this month, this in this month, especially if you're just starting like self-publishing, it can be so overwhelming. When I started looking up it, I wanted to puke every time I saw it because I would just be so overwhelmed. And doing it in steps. So, I would be stressing about Amazon ads. And it's like, why am I stressing about Amazon ads when I need to be focusing on like building a newsletter or even just like finishing this book and getting it to an editor? So it's like, okay, Amazon ads, you can go onto the to-do list months down the line. I don't need to think about you right now. So yeah, writing a list and just, slowly getting out of your comfort zone, like baby steps. With anxiety, some days it is like you can do anything. And some days it's like so crippling. You're just like, absolutely not. This is just not the day it's happening. And give yourself a break when you need to.
I have to say, small steps, love it. And we are big list makers, aren't we, Rachel? We love our lists. And I think sometimes that is literally the only way you can kind of stay sane, is just having that list. And then, as you said, trying not to think about everything all at once. It isn't easy though, because as you said, it's almost like you're being bombarded by pop-ups in your own head going, don't forget Amazon ads. Have you tried Facebook ads? Oh, have you done a blog hop? Have you got your website up and running? Don't forget to put that on. Oh, and get on BookBub. And it just fires at you all over the place. So I suppose, yeah, taking a bit of time and doing that kind of brainstorming thing about everything and then plotting it down. So do you do that in the sense of plan it over like months? Like, do you get a calendar out and write a list and then plot into the months? Or do you just kind of put a list in order and sort of work through it like that?
Well, I kind of like, I open a Word document, yeah, and then I'll put the months down and be like, hey, do this month, this month, and then I'll kind of have some like bullet points of things to do in the future, but I don't slot it into any months because stuff might happen, stuff might be behind. You might decide something is more important. So I think like having kind of a loose list, but don't stick to it rigidly. If something comes up, deal with it. So yeah, make a list, but don't be too rigid on it.
So you kind of allow the wiggle room, as you said. So like you say, I'll try these in the first month, but obviously if something comes up, you're not having to shunt everything down. You're only shunting maybe a few other things down to the next month and things like that.
Yeah, and everybody please heed Sam's words, because as someone who has learned that lesson the hard way, it is absolutely true. Because I do the same thing. I make a list and I assign each task to a specific month, and I give myself like a 3 to 4 week deadline for each thing. And then if I end up not having the time to do 1 or 2 things, everything gets moved down, and then I feel like I'm behind, and then that's just even more crippling anxiety. And again, it's a vicious cycle. But so yeah, I absolutely do agree having the loose list and schedule and just taking one thing at a time, because I do that too. And I think we kind of all do it. And in a weird way, it's also a form of motivation to me. Anyway, if I come up with a new book idea, I will start researching book cover designers, and I will start having like an image in my head of what I want the book cover to be like. Do I need to get a book cover right now? No, I don't need a book cover for another 5 years, because I know that's how long the manuscript's going to take me, if not longer. But it just kind of gets me in the mindset of it. So in a weird way, it can be motivating, but at the same time, it's also a form of procrastination, which can be caused from your anxiety. It's like a new book idea is great, but it's also scary at the same time because of everything that's going to come after when you finish the book. If you finish the book, who knows? That's a whole nother can of worms.
I don't appreciate being called out like that, Rachel. I mean, rude.
I'm calling myself out too, Ari. It's okay. We're in this together.
Actually, Sam, can I just ask, of all the marketing that you did when you brought your book out, what thing was the most sort of anxiety inducing that you found?
See, and now I feel like I've kind of just blocked it all out.
That's fair.
I think the biggest thing for me was I made a couple of videos where I was like, when you unbox your copy for the first time, and because I've seen that those have been very popular online, and doing that and filming myself and having to kind of roughly edit that was probably the most anxiety. And then putting myself online, right? It's different posting a photo versus posting you babbling like an idiot for everyone to see. So I think that was probably the biggest one for me.
I remember that video. I saw that video on your Instagram, and honestly, you came across absolutely cool and calm. It's like you were probably like shaking on the inside, but it did not come across. It came across really good. So I just have to say that you're very good.
Because I was dying inside.
You still did it though. You just faced it.
I know. So that's back to the first thing, just do it, but do it when you're ready.
Did you have to talk yourself into it? Like, I'm pressed, say it.
Yeah, like I had just my phone going, and there must have been like 10 minutes of me just like talking to myself, and there'd be in between it would just be like making noises to like kind of help with the anxiety and stuff. It was just a mess. It's basically like, your messy first draft that you don't want anyone to ever see. You're like, no one can ever see the entirety of this video. They will think I am a crazy person.
But you're not a crazy person, though, because I'm pretty sure it happens to absolutely everybody. And if you ever felt comfortable enough at some point down the line to share that with like your email list or something and just be like, here, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We get anxiety too, and we freak out as well. But hey, this is what we do. But actually, I'm going to use that as a segue into our final question, because since anxiety is a part of us and we love writing for some unknown reason, can anxiety ever help your writing?
Well, for me, there is a hard deadline I have to meet, and I'm procrastinating. I can get it done. For like example, when I was getting my cover done, I didn't really have a blurb, and I sent it to the artist and I'm like, I don't have a blurb yet. I had months and months and months to write this blurb, could not do it, had like 5 days, and it was just like, okay, now it's done. So that really helps, but kind of like back to what you said earlier, when you have too many deadlines and you're not meeting them, it can have the exact opposite effect, and you will just crumble and cease to exist, essentially.
No, that's a good point, because I know many people who actually work better if they procrastinate. Like if they get things done last minute, it doesn't matter if they have like a year to get something done, they will still do it the night before and it'll come out great. So I get that. That's a mood actually right there.
Yeah, that's me. Because I had months to write my short story, the second one for the anthology. I did it on the day. I had 4 hours to write 7,000 words, 8,000 words, and I did it in 4 hours and got it in like the deadline. And I'd had months. I had totally had months, and I'd been struggling with the idea. And then because it was like, and because it was an external deadline, it was somebody else's deadline. Because I find if I set a deadline, I know that I can ignore it. But if somebody else sets me a deadline, like you said with yours, you're like, your cover artist needed it. So it was somebody else putting that kind of pressure on, or like an editor saying, right, we need your copy now. Yeah, that's the only time when I actually find I can kick it into gear. I have tried putting my own deadlines on, and I ignore myself. I'm not that interesting and important to myself. So I can skip that deadline. But if somebody externally says, right, you've got till the end of December, it's like, I will probably wait till, December 29th. But I will do it.
It's actually quite interesting that we do that. If it's for somebody else, we have very little issue getting it done. But if it's for ourselves, we can't seem to find the time of day to do it. And I was actually having a similar conversation with my cousin just the other night, because her sister, she was like, the things that she does, it's because someone else needs her to do them, but she never like does anything for herself and stuff like that. And even we've talked about the podcast. The only reason the podcast is run this long is because we're doing it together. You count on me to do my part, and I count on you to do your part. If I was doing this by myself, the podcast would have died probably a month into it airing. And my cousin was like, well, that's because you don't love yourself enough. I was like, what does that have to do with anything? And she was like, no, it's true. She's like, that's your people pleaser in you. You do it for other people because they're counting on you. But when you want to count on yourself, you can't do it. And I was like, well, thanks for that. But it actually kind of made a lot of sense, because it's true. Like, it's easier to do things for other people rather than do it for yourself, because for some reason you don't find yourself important enough, or you don't find your work worthy enough. And it goes all the way back to that damn imposter syndrome and the anxiety. And it's a weird thing to think about.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is anxiety because you don't want to let anyone else down. If someone's giving you their time to do your cover, to do your editing, I appreciate you're paying them. I appreciate that. But at the same time, you lose that weird feeling. It does make you anxious if you let somebody down. So yeah, I think an external deadline is a very useful thing. I'm going to throw one very, very, very quick question at you, Sam. Is there anything, especially regarding marketing, is there anything you think you won't do because of anxiety? Like maybe going to an event or a book signing or like TV interview with Oprah? I don't know. Is there anything you think, you know what, that is just too much? I don't think I'll ever cross that. Or do you think you'll just like push through?
I think, yeah, like in-person book stuff, like when they'll set up their stalls and be there, and I am just, oh my God. Like the thought of that is making me like die right now. Like I'm just like, I'm so awkward. I have like no social skills. Like I would need my boyfriend there beside me to like be the person who does the talking, because like I can't do it. If I'm just in a situation, I just get that, what's it called? Like selective mutism, where like that sounded like a mutation. Selective mutism, where you just like, you can't speak and you can't make yourself even say a single word. So I definitely do not see that being in my future. But I mean, who knows? This time last year, I don't think I would have been able to do a podcast. So
step in the right direction.
Look at me now. But yeah, I think in person is just makes me want to just curl into a ball and like crawl, like just have a hole open up underneath me and take me. That's how much I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I get that. It's horrible. Is it the like people staring at you though, or it's like, because I know you get some people going, oh, I wouldn't want to do like a book signing because what if nobody turned up? And it'd be like, oh my God, I would have hired like people to come and get a signed book just so it don't look like nobody's interested. But I couldn't stand the idea of like loads of people staring at you while you're doing a book reading. It's like, I don't know. No, that sounds awful.
Yeah, like I do not like being the center of attention. I do not like people looking at me. Like when I think about, this is like a completely random off-topic thing, but when people are like fantasizing about having a wedding, I could never do that because like I'm like the bride, the center of attention. Absolutely not. Like everyone's looking at me. No. Like I do not like being the center of attention.
No, I absolutely get that. I'm the exact same way, and I agree. But like my answer is the same as yours for that question. I don't like the spotlight. I don't like the center of attention. I feel like if I was at a craft fair or something and I had a stall and I had a buddy with me and people were just like coming by my stall and talking to me there, I feel like I could do that. But if I was at a book signing or reading where I was like the only one on and everybody was giving me attention, absolutely not. No. So yeah, that's the public speaking thing is just a huge big red X. No.
Yeah, I'm the same because it's like I don't speak well generally. I get my words mixed up. I mean, this is the reason why we have scripts so we can like read things because trying to do it ad hoc, it would just be so much worse. And if everyone's staring at you, and I totally get it with the wedding thing. I mean, we thought about getting married once and then was like, yeah, no. If I decided to do that, first of all, it'd be like 3 people. And second, I'd have paid someone to stand at the back and like scream fire or something at the last minute just so that nobody would be looking, they'd all be turning around to look that way. Oh my God, no. I appreciate there's so many people who can just like go out there and be like, yay, I had 50 people come at my book signing. It's like, oh, no thanks. That sounds horrific, if I'm honest. Horrific. Okay, Sam, it has been absolutely great having you on. We really appreciated you coming on to our little podcast. Before you go, would you like to share a little bit of something about yourself with our listeners?
Yeah, so I write a sort of fantasy, horror, sci-fi mashups. It's usually featuring some kind of portal, but it's not quite portal fantasy. And my debut novel, The Afterlife Experiment, just came out. It's about scientists unearthing evidence of the afterlife and the consequences our world is facing because of that. It's kind of like if Stranger Things met Donnie Darko with some shades of Twin Peaks in it. So if you like weird, it'll be for you. It's the first part of a trilogy. I'm currently drafting the sequel with a lot of anxiety that we just talked about. And when I'm not writing or doing that, I also have a freelance editing business called Wise Cat Editing. So I'm always just writing or editing and being anxious about the whole time.
I love the name Wise Cat Editing. Love it. Thank you so much again for being on the podcast. Sam's links will all be down in the description, so please go and check out her work, go and check out her editing business. And in the meantime, we'll turn it over to you guys. Do you suffer from anxiety and how has it affected your writing? Let us know your answers in the comments so we can chat about it. Remember, we do release new episodes every Wednesday. Next week, we're discussing how you can use mind mapping for your stories. To ensure you don't miss it, hit the subscribe button on your way out. And as always, thanks for listening to the Mayor Writer Podcast. See you next week. This podcast is brought to you by Writer's Block. We hate our brains. The music titled Inspired is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons 4.0.